When two students from the Magic Academy challenged each other to a duel, no one expected such an event. Gray produced a magical ether ball that was 100 times larger than his opponent's. If the professor hadn't intervened, the other student would have been absolutely wrecked. Looking at Gray, he couldn't comprehend how he had obtained such power. Never before had any student acquired such amazing strength. But the reality is, Gray is a regressor, and he wasn't always this strong. Here's how his story started. It's the final battle between humanity's greatest heroes and their evil opponent. But this time, we're not following some glorified, overpowering hero. Instead, our protagonist is just another foot soldier, doing his job carefully. Being the lowly runt he is, a sharp stray laser smashes straight through his chest, a hit so intense that he doesn't even resist and just lets it pass through. And that finishes up his story. In his final moments, he looked around at his fellow troops, dead and spread across the battlefield. As about the so-called greatest heroes, well, they're embroiled in a heated fight against humanity's arch-nemesis, the Liquidator. Among the heroes are 4 heroic fighters, each with unique features and flashy powers. And then, there are individuals like our son, foot soldiers, thrown in as sacrificial pawns. These men are basically like NPCs standing in the corner with no dialogue. Their purpose? Just die. He feels pitiful about himself, knowing how little he has contributed to this conflict. If only he had been born with some kind of talent. But as great as those heroes might be, they don't stand a chance either. The Liquidator slices through them like cucumbers. Literally, a single hit is all it took to wipe them out. Turns out that monster was merely toying with his prey the whole time. Humanity's fate has finally been sealed already. Or at least, that's what Gray Lee thought. This is then he remembers that his heart has already been ripped into bits. And yet, he's still not dead. Next thing he knows, he's standing in the middle of the ruins. In front of him is this omnipotent creature who gives zero context for what's going on. The unidentified dude claims that Gray's body has already healed, but the strange part is that he healed himself utilizing powers buried deep inside him all along. The entity goes on to further state that Gray is actually considerably stronger than the Liquidator, the same villain who killed all those heroes like swine. However, he's not sure if Gray can even manage such power. So for now, the entity grants our son a piece of his own power, just enough to take down the Liquidator. Back in the actual world, Gray's blade is instantly enveloped by weird energy. Gifted by the all-powerful deity, without wasting time, he puts this enthusiasm to the test. To test if it's the real stuff or simply hot air. Turns out this power carries a serious punch. So much so that the Liquidator actually commends Gray for his strength. But it's still not enough. As Gray goes in for another strike, boom, he's chopped in half like the rest. Blood gushes from his bisected torso, while the Liquidator, curiously enough, praises him again. He's the first guy to push the Liquidator far enough that he had to go all out. But the Liquidator is in for another surprise. Gray isn't done yet. That blackish energy is propelling him. The lower half of his body, which was gone a second ago, has now rebuilt, made completely of black energy. Bro is going full Black Clover mode with that enormous sword of his. It's a sight to behold. To think that someone could truly make the Liquidator waver. The enemy sees no other option other than to build up a honeycomb shield to guard his wretched self. Gray doesn't even look human anymore. He slams down with his huge blade, and the force sends tangible shockwaves through the air. The barrier shatters into sparkling bits, and Mr. Cocky ends up eating shit with the full impact of the hit. Now the bastard is truly questioning if the monster he's battling is even human. Hell, he's not sure whether Gray is even alive. Meanwhile, our boy is asking himself the same thing. But right now, all that matters is the struggle. And yep, this weirdo is tough as nails. But our boy is also motivated to do the math and tear this supper down. He's not stopping until this menace is eradicated. He throws another wild slash, and this freaky fuck starts bleeding this spooky golden blood. In retaliation, the weirdo busts out some next-level jutsu and sprouts celestial wings. Looks like he's tampering with time itself. Day goes into night, with the moon gleaming like a spotlight from the gods. It's quite impressive, and Gray admits it, but not impressive enough to shatter his confidence. He goes full throttle, aiming a preemptive strike directly toward the Liquidator's neck. But shockingly, the sword doesn't pierce. There's some odd shield around him again. Then he starts yapping stuff that sails straight over my head. Apparently within this level of true dusk, nothing can injure him. Or at least that's what this jerk claims. He tells Gray to look up into the sky to see exactly how deep in muck he really is. Well, our boy glances up out of curiosity and sees a brilliant star-like thing glowing with unbelievable intensity. Then bang, the thing falls down like a damn meteor and obliterates Gray from existence. The liquidator stands victorious, peering down at the crater left behind. But happily, that mysterious entity from earlier comes up again, just in time to rewind everything and send our lad back into the past with a sole task, which is to save the planet. By the way, that mystery man's name is Kronos. Apparently he and the liquidator have some type of history, but no one is telling us what kind. So anyhow, cut back to our guy who opens his eyes in a serene green neighborhood shortly after his regression. It's quiet, serene, and honestly really damn photogenic. Turns out he's in his hometown, Renato Village. Not only his hometown, but the prior version of it. He is almost 15 years in the past. Looks like Kronos kept his word. Gray's been transported back in time for one final try at rescuing the planet. Suddenly, a stinging ache crawls through his hand. When he takes a look at his hand, he discovers wounds and bandages wrapped around his wrist. Now that he thinks about it, this was the point in his life when he was practically a punching bag for Belder and his crew. But with this new shot at life, it'd be fairly pathetic if he still ended up getting tormented. Then again, there's no way he could fight those guys head on. Bro is way out of their league. In hindsight, even beating the liquidator sounds like a fantasy. Anyway, he's got to figure out how to deal with these bullies, or he's bound to endure the same misery all over again. Seems like Bro can't catch a break. Or can he? He just so happens to stumble across the very idiots he's been fearing the most. Of course, it's Belder and his goons. Since they've been bored lately, they've been on the quest for our guy, eager to continue their practice of good old-fashioned bullying like it's their new religion. They hurl a spare sword at his feet, commanding him to pick it up. Our youngster stares at the blade, bewildered. He still hasn't figured out what these men are up to. After all, it's been 15 years, so memories are a bit blurry. Belder, meantime, feels Gray is pretending to be stupid on purpose, so he is kind enough to remind him about their typical mock battles. Hearing that, Gray instantly tries to brush these pests off by pointing to his damaged hand. He's happy for the welcome, but sadly, he can't join because the ailment hasn't healed yet. But it looks like Bro can't shake these hobos unless he picks up the sword and fights. They even promise him the swords are totally dull, so there's virtually any possibility of getting wounded. Gray, however, can't ignore the idea that harm is still conceivable. No matter how dull the blade, it's still a chunk of iron. One wrong hit in the wrong area might book your one-way trip to heaven. Well, he's got a point. One simple tap on the balls, and you'll be slumped over on the ground in agonizing pain. But these guys don't appear to comprehend the reasoning underlying Gray's words. Belder takes his stance, ready to strike. He dislikes hearing no from Gray, so he charges at him like a raging bull to start the duel. Gray was given time to grasp the sword, but it's up, and Belder is already charging at him. Our child finds it ridiculous that this dude calls it a fake war, while charging like he's pissed off at his own mother. That's when Gray remembers something a former military doctor told him. The reason his swordsmanship never improved was because of an accident he experienced as a boy. Now that he thinks about it, maybe this is the injury that changed his life forever and compelled him to live like a runt. Belder comes smashing down with his blade, but Gray blurs away and dodges the hit. Seriously though, even Gray himself is amazed that he managed to dodge it. Belder's face likewise hardens with displeasure at seeing such excellent agility. He delivers another strike, which my guy dodges again. Then a rapid attack targeted at his feet is likewise easily evaded. The bastard's working hard to tag our boy. He's like a bloodthirsty man on a mission, desperate to take his opponent down. But Gray glides through like a ninja on drugs. At first, Gray thought Belder was merely slow, but then he discovers that it's not the Belder who has been slow, it's he himself who has gotten faster. Bro is basically avoiding every strike like he pays rent. Even Belder's goons can't ignore what they're seeing. It's like Gray is a whole other person. He might not have the physique he once had, but he still has the memories of every war he's fought. With all that experience imprinted in his head, his body is practically on autopilot. He barely even has to try to dodge those attacks. Then Gray snatches the sword to keep this so-called pretend war going, which isn't feeling so joke anymore. Belder is drowning in his own vanity, desperately seeking to crush Gray under his harsh blade. But my guy had enough. He swings his sword for the first time. The unexpected jerk from his tremendous swing leaves Belder's hand throbbing like hell. That merely demonstrates how pathetic Belder actually is. If Gray is being honest, He genuinely feels like the loser here, duking it out with such a weakling. But he also believes that Belder doesn't deserve an ounce of pity. He's the piece of garbage who bullied Gray, took away his future, and caused all that suffering. So with all due respect, Gray is going to make Belder taste his own medicine. On the next move, Gray effortlessly knocks the blade clean out of Belder's hand, unarming him instantly. While Belder can only feel the shame, Gray understands this person is worse than he believed. He takes the chance to unleash a jab, mocking Belder's inexperience with a sword. One single hit sent Belder's sword flying. Then again, being unarmed isn't a major concern. After all, Belder was the one who argued these blood swords were completely safe to employ in a battle. Gray is going absolutely insane, swinging the blade so fast that physically tears through Belder's skin, causing blood to flow out. As the reality of the situation settles in, Belder's knees lose all power and crumble. Wait a minute. Gray thought he was using a blunt blade, so how come this guy started bleeding? When he checks at his sword to confirm, he finds out it's definitely a blunt one. Though if it had been a sharp blade, this person may actually be dead. Now, let's not get diverted from the matter at hand. Gray swings the sword precisely, knocking off many teeth and leaving Belder's nose bleeding like mad. My guy is towering right over this bastard, giving him goosebumps for life. It's always fairly hilarious to see arrogant pieces of garbage getting turned into sobbing shambles. Seems like this much is enough to humble Belder for the rest of his life. Oh well, looks like I spoke too soon. This bastard still hasn't learned his lesson. He instructs his goons to retrieve our boy and lash his ass till he's a total wreck. The thugs hesitate to go forward for obvious reasons. They literally just saw their boss get pummeled like a weak puppy, so it makes no sense to succumb to the same fate, even though they have the capacity to avoid it. One of the boys advises they attack in synchrony to overwhelm Gray. The trio swiftly rushes into action, enveloping our boy from every direction. Gray nevertheless seems nonchalant as ever. If these guys truly want their death wish accomplished, my guy is more than ready. Everyone lunges at him, planning to finish him right here. At first, Gray had an ounce of sympathy for these hobos and had decided to spare them, but it looks like they won't stop until they learn their lesson. So he delivers these filthy goblins what they actually deserve. Not long after, their faces are swelled like a baboon's backside after a harsh face massage. Once again, Gray finds it ridiculous that these crying emojis in human form used to be his biggest nightmare. He recalls this group is currently students of Saria's swordsmanship dojo. Belder confirms they are students of that dojo, though they haven't been visiting lately since these soggy biscuits figured they were already powerful enough. Well, that's fairly low standards for someone who's supposed to be strong enough. Not that Gray expects much from the dojo itself. He displays interest in attending the dojo, therefore he wants these goons to act as his referral. Belder refuses to meet the request. After all, he can't comprehend the ramifications. Once his master finds out, he miserably got his ass handed to him. Gray understands just how to deal with these men. He gently swings his sword around to terrify these suckers, hinting at the worst that could happen if they don't listen. Funnily enough, this small threat works wonders. Belder is not only humbled, but that beatdown given him the speed of a cheetah. He practically races down the road to reach the dojo as fast as possible, even leaving his pals behind. A while later, they enter the town. As they walk, Belder shares his wonder why Gray is interested in entering a dojo. Turns out this dojo has a recommendation spot for the academy. Our lad doesn't have to say more, as he's convinced Belder is mature enough to comprehend what his major purpose is. One of the guys questions why Gray even feels the need to enter a school when he's already powerful enough. Little do these bitches know, my boyfriend doesn't set the bar that low. He's got his own concept of enough. He vividly remembers the day all of humanity's heroes got killed like pigs in the blink of an eye, and that was meant to be the world's strongest lineup. Forget the heroes, even he couldn't scratch that guy with all the mysterious strength he had. Only God knows how much power will be required to vanquish that bastard, though he wasn't utterly useless back then. The moment he received those amazing dark powers, he felt like an omnipotent being that could destroy anything. The thing that held him back was a lack of swordsmanship ability. He had been relying on a few tactics he acquired from the Sword Saint. If only he had spent more time training in swordsmanship, just like the Sword Saint did, he's very confident he could have turned the course of the fight single-handedly. This is presumably why Kronos brought him here, to grind his ass out until he's worthy to wield that dark mystery power again. A while later, we meet the master those goons were talking about. The group is getting an earful for instigating a fight with a random civilian, and what's worse, all they received after confronting that civilian was a humiliating defeat. This frightening woman is swordsmanship dojo instructor Saria. Belder tries to stress they weren't truly aiming to bully anyone. It was only a mere mock war. The poor bastard ends up getting a severe blow for his falsehoods, a hit hard enough that he'd be on the moon with this one-way ticket. His thugs are shaking in horror, wishing they could simply survive this day. Nothing to be terrified of, boys. The prank she just executed was a small lesson she wanted to give these fools. If they term beating up someone unarmed a fake battle, then what she did also counts as a mock combat. She puts her sword straight over Belder's ugly face and expels him out of the dojo instantly. Not only him, but his goons are joining him too. With that, those stupid goons take their pathetic loser commander and walk out pathetically. She instantly twirls around, sits on her feet, and apologizes to her new recruit on behalf of her former students who caused him a lot of problems. My guy brushes off the apology, back to business. She's heard he wants a referral to the academy, to which my boyfriend affirms it. Since Belder and his second-rate staff caused him a lot of grief, she's willing to write a letter of recommendation for him. Though before doing that, she wants him to prove his worth. Both contenders stand against each other, wooden swords in hand. Being the senior, she gently offers him the opportunity to strike first, and thus the exchange of blows begins. They move so swiftly that virtually all they leave behind are trails of silhouettes from their terrible strikes. All the while, Saria conducts her job, which is to appraise our boy's talents. She can tell his swordsmanship is pretty practical for his age. It's as if he's been through innumerable conflicts before. Now it makes sense why those bozos got their butts handed to them by a single person. His style is primarily self-taught, although every so often, his swordplay seems comparable to what's taught at the academy. This certainly suggests someone definitely taught him, yet his technique is still bad. One thing's for sure, though. He's got a lot of natural talent, asking to be tapped and nurtured to its utmost. She's practically found a gem in the rough. Now that she's assessed him, she chooses to terminate the combat with the last blow she's about to give. My guy braces himself and effortlessly parries her attack. This ghastly dance once again begins. Bro is literally parrying each of her assaults like he's allergic to damage. This encourages the woman to get nervous. The lack of reluctance on his side is throwing her off. It's like no strike she tries can falter his posture. Hell, she even starts to feel annoyed with herself. To think she had to give her all in a pretend combat that was merely supposed to test this young gun's talents. She feels overwhelmed to the point she starts feeling fear. For a moment, he appears like some demonic monster, poised to unleash something terrible. After surviving the last strike from our guy handily, she realizes it was just a wild swing. After that tremendous swing, Gray starts to feel exhausted as his energy level lowers. The woman sees him pouting and confuses it for a vulnerability in his resistance. So, she rushes like a furious cat, only to find herself checkmated straight on the spot. The tables flipped on her, the splintered wooden sword hits the ground, while Gray finds himself stumped. For a second there, he found his way back to the same dark strength he gained in his battle against the Liquidator. The fact that he employed a hint of the same power now suggests that he still has access to his skills, even after regressing into the past. But then, it happens. An agonizing disadvantage engulfs his body in so much misery that he drops to his knees. He can't even hold himself to stand, while Saria is horrified by his situation and tries to help. Even after exerting a fraction of his strength, Gray recognizes that his current body is inadequate to exhibit his talents. Still, he musters the determination to stand on his feet again, despite his body shaking. After telling her that he's okay, Gray finds himself caught in his thoughts, realizing he can hardly stand, which underlines just how efficient he's going to have to be with his powers. Oh, he's also thinking about disclosing the information about his power to the skilled swordmaster in front of him. Saria just looks at him dead lost and puzzled. Meanwhile, our youngster examines the issue with a clear head and thinks that he shouldn't inform anyone about what happened. After all, who would ever believe his ludicrous story? And it's also not like he can control his dark powers at will to demonstrate what he means. Bearing that in mind, he comes up with an innocent justification that he merely overexerted himself. But to the swordmaster, she doesn't trust him for a damn second, thinking how absurd he's sounding with that excuse. There's just no possibility for him to have sliced her wooden sword when they were battling with dull weapons in the first place. She's proven to be intelligent, to the point she recognizes that Gray is keeping something from her. Virgil's daughter points what's left of her blade towards our boy, forcing Gray to query if something's wrong. Clearly, by the way he is handling his emotions, she recognizes that he doesn't want to talk about anything for now. Instead of pushing him on it, she respects his decision and asks about his initial motivation in gaining a reference to the academy. Our child verifies this, sharing that he heard she could help him with it. Saria doesn't dispute it either. She underlines that with just her authority, she can assist him gain a reference to the Royal Academy of Swordsmanship, the highest educational institution their kingdom has to offer. At the same time, strangely, she shares no interest in advising him to enter that institution, saying that Gray is an unfit individual for the academy. Her frigid words cut him sharper than any blade. Gray starts beating himself internally, doubting his talents, and conceding that he's too weak. His final attack was the only spectacular thing he'd done in that war. But wait, Saria's not finished talking. She continues her remarks, proposing that instead of going to the Royal Academy, the kid should instead proceed to the World Union Academy instead. What a plot twist that is. The revelation hits him harder than Troop Kun hitting his isekai victims. Though the Royal Academy is their country's greatest, the Planet Union Academy is the best in the entire planet. The institution is called the Peak of Sword Skill. Gray's at a loss for words, because this same Magic Academy is responsible for generating the strongest combat squad, including the likes of the Sword Saint Amy. He quickly confronts Saria, wondering if he's even qualified to attend a prominent college like that. Funnily enough, the girl crushes his expectations, pointing out that as he is right now, there's not a shot in hell that he's getting past the door. The Swordmaster knows that even Gray is afraid of his flaws, especially when it comes to his terrible state of a physique right now. When it comes to the Royal Academy, the boy might be able to pull off a miracle because of his sword talents alone. But that's just not the case for the World Union Academy. So yeah, dude's fucked if he doesn't train his ass off. Even Saria is startled. The youngster has incredible aptitude in his swordplay, and yet he's got a stick man of a body. Doubt is starting to sneak in, actually making Gray worry about the tremendous opponents he'll have to battle against in the World Union Academy. It's not exactly a walk in the park, and with his current condition, that's out of the question anyway. Seeing his unhappy state, Saria points out how he's quick to give up. Even though there are 9 complete months until the Academy's entrance exam, again being underconfident in his abilities, Gray worries that even that time won't be enough for him. Despite her effort in trying to encourage him, even Saria believes that it's too little of a time, yet even then she provides him a chance. The Swordmaster wants him to trust her for the 9 months to come, since during this time, she's going to make him go through hell and back. Yeah, something tells me she's going to hire David Goggins and make this guy run 3 ultramarathons and do 6,000 pull-ups. Anyway, Gray concedes that though he doesn't want to suffer, he doesn't have any other choice. Declaring himself ready, he expects that the Swordmaster would take excellent care of him. Saria takes a liking to his forward determination. At first, you guys probably think it's a good omen that they're starting off on a happy one, but the atmosphere rapidly shifts to absolute horror when Virgil's daughter officially announces the commencement of his torturous training. Gray's excruciating tribulations began. He trained like Goku and honestly ate like him too. She really is putting him through a bulking period. He also had to deal with some dodgy meals, but his teacher was merciless and put him through everything. Their sword duels continued the same, the purpose of which was to hone his techniques. And then 8 months passed, just like that. Congratulations to Gray for getting his shredded body after undergoing so long training. Even Saria is out here admiring his muscles. She's got nothing in her armory left to offer him. He's ready to venture out into the real world now. But her relaxed attitude confuses Gray because there's still a whole month remaining until the entrance exam. Virgil's daughter warns our lad that he's going to be spending a lot of time driving to get to the place of the entrance exam. That's why he had to go early. As a final show of gratitude, Saria hands him a bag of money, ensuring him a smooth vacation, taking care of his bills for the month. Now that's a genuine teacher. As for our child, he still doesn't feel well about the notion of leaving so soon. Her strong attitude hurts him because he thinks his teacher is driving him away like he's a burden. Smiling at his answer, she feels he's confusing the problem. Suddenly, Gray brings up the notion of an ogre's nest nearby, arousing Saria's attention. He also points out that the town is completely unsafe with the lack of security guards. The sword master confirms the existence of the nest as well, as it was discovered recently. At the same time, she grins at him, believing that nothing awful will happen. If the worst scenario arises, they'll merely have to rely on the royal capital for support. Though Gray is frightened, she thinks his primary focus should be to take his exam, without any wandering thoughts. In his mind, he's certain like hell that his teacher is lying to him, calming him so that he doesn't have to worry. The royal capital is never going to send help to a minor town, and when the village is plundered and destroyed by the ogres, it will inevitably result in Saria's horrific death. In his initial existence, he learned that she died taking on the struggle alone. Anyway, he doesn't tell her any of this and just accepts the situation, thanking his teacher for helping him out all this time. Gray prepares to leave straight away, earning Saria's smile. She and her two large personalities are cheering for him to pass. A few days later, we see a glimpse of her braving a perilous passage to make her way to the nest. Here, skeletal remains of victims are horribly placed on the trees as a warning. Saria is trying to hunt down the nest using the information she acquired from the scout. Spotting the trail of blood ahead, she realizes that danger waits ahead, but before she does anything, the sword master is terrified by the familiar voice of her apprentice. Sitting on top of the tree branch, he questions where his beloved master is headed so late at night. Receiving an unexpected arrival from him, she questions what he's doing right here when he's meant to be focusing on the academy. Sticking his landing on the ground, he teases her for doubting him when he should be doing it to her instead. She lied to him when she stated she was going to disregard the matter of the nest and let the royal capital handle it. Making an excuse, Saria claims that the royal capital declined to attend due to their personal affairs, which is why she went on the job herself. She's confident in her sword ability, figuring that whatever it is in that nest, she can defeat it. Especially after hearing the report of the scout, Saria discloses that her opponent is going to be an elite ogre, and henchman monsters range about roughly 50 creatures apart from the boss. She knows fighting off the monsters will be tough due to their numbers, but it's not stopping her from going. By the way, even Gray concedes that an elite ogre isn't powerful, at least not enough to defeat a woman of her caliber. However, the thing about the ogres is that their particular edge comes to their intellect and overwhelming numbers. With so many of them in that nest, Saria is undoubtedly going to perish if they manage to surround and overpower her. Apart from that, our son knows one thing with total assurance. Because of his knowledge of his prior existence, having Saria carry on the assignment alone is like sending her to her death. And in the end, the community will also be annihilated, with no guardian remaining. That's the terrible future that he's already experienced before. With that in mind, the young follower requests to pair up with her, but his master isn't kind, indicating that she's all good on her own. Instead of wasting time attempting to convince her that she won't be enough, Gray skillfully informs her that he wants to obtain actual battle experience. He even goes on to guilt-trip her, wondering if she's concerned he'll become a burden in her path. Though he's smart, his master points out the folly of what he just said. Their ability differential is practically comparable right now, to the extent where she struggles to defeat him during their mock battles. Even with that aspect in view, Saria tells her disciple that a genuine battle is much more different, especially when you account for a monster nest like this one. This duty involves enormous danger, which is the reason she doesn't want Gray to risk his life, at least not until he has more battle experience. Her pupil is horrified to hear her conviction. After all, Saria wasn't budging in her stance, so he looks for one final resort, an idea that he wishes to share with his master. At first, she's startled, until Gray straight up challenges her to a fight, pledging to put her to sleep and then moving on by himself to confront the monster. The scenario is tense. The pupil has just challenged his teacher to a real battle, his blade pointing at her. Gray awaits for her reaction. Realizing that her student is just as stubborn as she is, Saria acknowledges defeat. She doesn't want him to go on alone, so she reverts to his original idea of going together. All she worries about is that he returns in one piece, and yes, the one piece is real. Both of them get together and head into the forest to battle the monsters. The night grows older, and finally the master and the pupil locate the site of the nest. The intelligent creatures exploit their environment to their advantage. They created a nest that offers no room for escape, in case someone dared to venture all the way here to challenge them. Saria thinks that the animals must be confident in their skill, but Gray contends that it's actually more of a disadvantage for the two of them, as they'll have to battle carefully. Observing from a safe distance, she's pretty astonished. The boss is not to be located among the gathering, which makes her question if it's hiding in its tent. If that is the case, it's wonderful for them, because this way, they'll be able to kill many of the henchmen before the elite ogre can meet them. To discuss fighting strategy, Saria orders her student to target the creatures from one side, while she's going to cover the other side. Executing the plan immediately away, both of them spring into action with their swords in hand. The showdown begins. Before the creatures are even capable of realizing the situation, the majestic Saria is already on top of them, executing a clean headshot, making a football of the creature's head as it flops to the ground. With the first monster down, the rest of them mutter and roar at each other in their tongue. The entire crew is outraged and jumps directly into murder mode, prepping their weapons to slay the intruders. But it doesn't matter, since our lad is going beast mode with the way he's slaying the horde. This guy is a one-man army, cross-cutting many monsters all at once. The exquisite Saria is all the same, showing off her remarkable skills that she learned from Papa Virgil. The two of them are unstoppable. Gray and Saria flawlessly cover each other's backs. Within the period of a few minutes, every single monster in sight is reduced to a body count for them. By the way, she's actually fairly impressed by Gray's unshakable commitment in a real war. He's never been more ready, reminding his owner to keep on her guard too. Here's the point though. Something about the situation is giving him a horrible vibe. This struggle has been too easy for them. Very too easy, in fact. Because if this is the level that Saria had to confront, then she could have defeated all of them by herself, even without his support. And that drives him to a state of uneasiness. Because whatever is resting within the tent, it's going to be much more scary than everything they've faced so far. Speaking of which, the creature's scary pair of eyes flash through the dark tent, glaring at him from afar. The second Gray comes in contact with the creature's eyes, he shudders in shock. Despite his might, he cowers and informs his master that they have to go immediately. Even Saria doesn't grasp what's gotten into him all of a sudden. Without explaining anything, he roars at her to run, with so much terror in his voice that Saria doesn't question him. She simply follows his orders and bolts right after him. As they're sprinting along, you might be thinking that they'll escape. But nah, because their scary opponent practically leaps over from the skies with a tremendous vertical. Gray is horrified when the monster plants his feet into the ground, confronting the bold humans. Saria's attitude transforms to shock, pointing out how the boss monster has personally come to them for a combat. But then Gray reveals a bombshell that no one even imagined. This isn't the boss monster at all. Right as he's ready to divulge the location of the true boss, a huge voice roars at them from behind. This daring yell unleashes another wave of beasts to chase after them. The exhilarating cacophony is overwhelming for Saria, but for the ogres, it has changed them into battle-hungry maniacs. Saria sweats with horror, failing to comprehend her own senses. There's a creature more terrible, more brooding than an elite ogre, and it's leading the entire gang. Finally, Gray confesses that they're up against an ogre general. He's the genuine boss of the monster nest. I have to remind you folks, they're physically sandwiched right now. On one side, there's the elite ogre blocking their escape. Going back isn't an option either, because a big horde awaits them along with the real boss of the nest. Saria expresses her disbelief, fully aware that they can't battle a monster like this even at their level. Their sole hope of winning is to slay the elite ogre in front of them to escape. So she does precisely that, by charging toward the beast and smashing her blade against his. Determined to win this combat, she exploits an opening and connects a sharp slash into the creature's body. Blood shoots out of the cut, and while ordinarily this is considered to be a good sign, her anxieties only deepen when she discovers that the wound is mending again. Meanwhile, our lad is clashing against dozens of monsters all on his own, sharing his knowledge of the ogre general's powers. Apparently, its roar considerably improves the power and recovery speed of the monsters. Basically, they're up against an exceptional ogre on steroids. Defeating even a normal one is so difficult right now that even Gray is having a hard time. Slashing one of the beasts, he tells Saria to cover his back. He urges her to only delay the struggle for a while longer, which makes her ponder what kind of miracle methods he's got planned. To that, our kid explains that in a case like this, they've only got one purpose in mind, and that is to murder the ugliest of them all, the bastard who's lurking behind his horde. The fight for survival begins as Gray clashes his blade against one of the beasts, indicating his irritation at getting encircled and flanked. He deflects the slash and discovers another enraged monster aiming at him. He's cutting past the adversaries, intent on clearing a clean road in front of him so that he may get to his objective. In carelessness, however, he exerts so much strength that it physically shatters his blade. This is actually troubling because now he's left without the one weapon he's secure in. He dodges the upgraded ogre's downward swipe and concentrates his attention to bringing out his backup blade. Yeah, that's the sharpest main character I've seen in a while. Carrying a second sword signifies being prepared. Anyway, Gray is apprehensive that his blade won't stand up for long. Coming to his rescue, his master tosses her spare sword towards him, providing him yet another opportunity at triumph. With 2 extra swords in his hand, he has a stronger fighting chance. But nevertheless, even this won't be enough to slay every single one of these beasts. There's just too much friction in getting to the ogre general, while at the same time defeating its subordinates. Trusting his talents, this man goes batshit mad, releasing a super speed slash across his enemies. His forward momentum is stopped when one of the ogres tries to attack him. Luckily, he dodges and then immediately blocks the assault. The fight is fatiguing him, but he's still made substantial progress dealing with the beasts in front of him. The ogre general feels intimidated and chooses to unleash a second monster roar. To Gray's horror, the enhanced animals have just gained yet another increase in strength. This guy is not having a nice time, as he's struggling even more now, having to deal with them. Gray realizes that the ogre general is intelligent enough to see through his tactics. Now that it knows what the human is trying to achieve, the ogre general keeps on yelling to incite his subordinates to fight. Blocking one of the strikes, Gray rushes past the beasts to bolt right ahead. A horde of creatures is ready to welcome him. Instead of facing off every single one, he effectively slices through the ones that are immediately in his way. But even that leaves him with scratches and injuries all over his body. The massacre is wearing him down as he fights to race past their relentless volley of attacks. Letting his guard down, he gets tackled by one of the ogres and pinned into position. Things seem to be looking extremely awful for him because the ogres have him precisely where they wanted. Luckily, since they're so agitated, they've lost the sense to cooperate, because one of them slices through one of its own kind without thinking. Gray internalizes that their strategy is to possibly weaken his blades. While he's immersed in thought, a gigachad ogre loads a tremendous punch to crush his head. It's a do-or-die situation, and he definitely can't allow himself be hit, so he uses his sword to mitigate the harm. But even then, Bro is thrown into the ground with a thunderous thud solely from the collision force. Finding himself at the verge of his life, this man nevertheless strives to rise up in his broken state. That's the definition of a badass. With the previous onslaught breaking his spare blade, now he just has one sword remaining and dozens of ogres to slaughter, as well as their boss. Once more, the circumstance isn't in his favor. In fact, it's practically hard to get out of this. Despite undergoing a relapse, he fully knows his circumstances right now. Gray simply can't win, not against so many ravenous creatures wearing him down. So he decides to switch his combat plan, shouting at his master to flee away while he can still make himself a decoy for her escape. Saria hears this and smiles, refusing to treat him like such. She's still going off against the enhanced elite ogre, but Gray doesn't see why she's still determined to battle. He guarantees her to run away as he'll catch up soon after. But Saria denies his request, cruelly exposing that she has lost her capacity to run. She sustained a big gash on her thigh, reducing Gray's hopes to ashes. Even that strategy is out of the question anymore. There's no other path left but moving ahead to his death. Swinging his blade in wrath, he thinks of the reason why he regressed. Despite having such a hefty purpose, all of it is soon to come to an end. Tragically, our boy's final sword too breaks and shatters to pieces, and still he finds himself in denial. Despite having lost his weapon, Gray refuses to consider this the finale of his life. It's only he can unleash the power from the future, the dreadful capacity that matched the Liquidator and was able to harm him. If he can utilize it even for a time, then these beasts will be severed to pieces. Strongly imagining the feeling he experienced that moment, he charges his broken blade, entering a meditative condition, and when he reopens his eyes, Gray is no longer the same weakling he was before. A single dark flaming cut eviscerates the ogres, sending them to ashes with his burning black sword. Even Saria doesn't comprehend what's going on, but it looks that our youngster is still under control, as even after tapping into his dark powers, he gives her a smile of relief. In the following several seconds, Gray chops every single creature in his sight, including the ogre general. Even his master can't fathom what the hell just happened. She's too busy having to focus on the elite ogre in front of her. But now that the ogre general is killed, the boosting abilities seem to have worn off. Saria recognizes that now, she can simply kill the beast, as it no longer has any capabilities to regenerate. Using a Walmart version of Judgment Cut End, she chops the creature down, claiming that the elite ogre is worthless without its master. They triumphed at last. Both of them managed to stand against all the odds and won the fight. Despite having magically battered through an entire horde of ogres, Gray nevertheless apologizes for shattering her weapon. Saria reminds him that it's nothing compared to saving her life in exchange. She collects the blade and wants to confront him for the technique he pulled at the end. But before she can finish her statement, our lad drops to the ground, knocked fully unconscious because of the after effects, prompting his master to yell his name in distress. The perspective cuts to the inner mind of Gray. He questions his surroundings and spots nothing but a chained floating door in front of him. He's baffled until the door unleashes the same kind of black energy that he uses through his ability. A sudden realization dawns upon him. This is his very unique strength. He wonders what will happen if he succeeds to bust the door open. After all, he might seize the authority and make it his own. Determined to attempt, he marches forth. But the moment he takes his first step, a deathly sensation hovers over his body, frightening the ever-living soul out of him. And that's only after taking one step. Gray is so overcome with fear as he retreats his way back. He doesn't have all the answers surrounding the source of his strength. But one thing has been made extremely obvious to him just now. If he dares to provoke the use of his powers in his current state, there's no doubt in hell that he'll perish. And that's not simply a flippant claim, because the feeling is so horrible that it pushes him to tears. From the abyss, a voice creeps in his consciousness, commending him for his decision just now. Before Gray can absorb it any further, he wakes up in a frantic state in his bed. His master's there beside him, glad that he's finally awake. Worried, he asks where he's at. She explains that she brought him to the village's infirmary as fast as she could. This dude was literally knocked unconscious for 5 solid days. And I'm so delighted that the author didn't state 3 days like all the other stories. Anyway, she was terrified for his life, while Gray is having to live with the fact that he had to recover for over a week because of the burden of the technique he used. Even Saria thinks that he went above and beyond in the combat. It was the definition of defying all odds. Still, she's concerned about the state of his physique, and asks if he's capable of moving effectively. To try it out, our youngster tries to lift his arm, but he can't do shit. He can barely use it after wasting much energy, though with the state he is right now, there's no way he can hold a sword with an injury like this. Well, obviously there's no way he'd ever be able to rub one off either. So he has remedied this problem soon. Then, there's the bruise on his arm, left after the combat. Saria grows concerned about his condition, knowing that he's unable to move his body adequately. Gray confirms that he's helpless right now. Even his master concedes that his arm won't return to normal so fast, revealing that every single bone in his arm has been smashed to pieces. This realization surprises our youngster, because in a peculiar way, he doesn't feel any discomfort. That's actually thanks to the magic potion treatment he received. Our boy's jaw hits the floor, because these things are meant to be extremely freaking costly, and she just used one on him. Saria says that it's nothing to worry about, as the village chief personally rewarded them with it. The kid can't believe what he's hearing. He doesn't even know the village chief personally, and he's obtained a miracle potion at his expense. Saria thinks he's dumb for being unable to understand his circumstances, so she expresses it in strong words. Gray is officially the savior and the hero of the village. Before he can struggle with what she just said, the village leader hurries in to greet the youngster, congratulating him for everything he did. To bring out the magnitude of his feat, the village chief reminds the boy that an ogre general is so strong that it takes a whole town to fight against even one. That kind of monstrosity endangered their hamlet, and yet one lad was able to pound his way through, carving a path and slaying the monster, securing the village's survival. For that, the village head is grateful. It's because to the brave efforts of the youngster and his master that their lives are no longer threatened. Unable to accept all the praise, Gray contends that they're inflating what he did, but the village head thinks that it's him who is undermining what he did. Thinking about it for a time, Gray reflects on the outcome. He feels that maybe the village chief's statements are right. Remember his prior life? In that life, This place burned to the ground because of the ogres raiding it down to ashes. That's the magnitude of his success. The chief of the tribe is more than happy to give him a thorough explanation on what makes him so outstanding, but for now, he's focused on the boy's quest to pass the entrance exam for the World Union Academy. Speaking of which, Gray just remembered his genuine aim. He foolishly went to exterminate the creatures in the monster nest mere weeks before his exam. With all the time that was squandered in between, he's only got 2 days left till the day of the exam. Simply getting there takes 3 solid days on foot. His best alternative would be to use a horse to travel the distance on time, but he's dead broke and doesn't have the money to afford one. Making a surprise request, he begs the village chief to lend him a horse for the voyage. The fortunate news is that the commander was already anticipating the boy to make such a request, which is why he's already prepared the best horse for his travels. Saria smiles, indicating that their initial goal was to carry him, even if he hadn't woken up today. Some individuals actually support you despite your hardships, just like Gray's friends here, and I hope we encounter more of them in our life too. Gray exits the infirmary only to find the entire hamlet yelling the boy's name and rooting for his exam. They want him to do his best, and they're not afraid of congratulating him for what he did. Everyone donated little by bit so that he might register for the admission exam and sustain himself at the academy. The youngster is immensely grateful for the villagers, who showed him so much love with their support. He also jokingly remarks that it's going to be incredibly embarrassing if he fails and comes back. But Saria is excessively confident in her student, emphasizing that the students registering for the entrance exam aren't capable of beating an ogre general all on their own. But that's not the only worry. The child is worried about his arm, as it's still messed up, and there's no telling when it will heal. To that, his teacher argues that he should make use of his left arm in the interim. Even if his left arm is fully functioning, it's simply that he's more used to his right. But his tutor feels with his ability level, it won't matter. Gray reveals his concerns, claiming that the difficulty of the entrance exam may be overwhelming for him, to the point one arm will handicap him. But even so, Saria recognizes that the lecturers or the examiners at the institution have a discerning eye. When they recognize his talent, they'll select him. The child climbs his horse, while his teacher firmly declares that he's going to pass. That's the only outcome. Thanking her for everything she's done, he swears not to fail. Recalling how the hamlet was destroyed to the ground in his past existence, he's delighted that these folks got a second shot alongside him. The world is already changing from this moment onwards, and he's going to make sure to impact the future with his new power. In the next scene, our boy eventually makes his way to his destination. Staring ahead, he locks eyes with the grandeur of the World Union Academy. In the arena, the examiner announces the distribution of the exam tickets. All of the candidates will remain in the arena. From the sounds of it, there's a vast number of candidates, but only a little number of 20 are going to reserve a space in class. They bicker about the shifting amount of seats each year, because in certain years the academy even accepted 50 persons, while in rare occasions, it only accepted 1. So the rules for selection aren't absolute, evidently. Anyway, Professor Ariel steals the limelight and rises to the front. She addresses the examinees and says that they'll have to gather the paper being given. With a snap of her fingers, a vortex of yellow opens, releasing magical energy and instantaneously generating the tickets in each examinee's hand. Our boy collects his ticket. His examinee number is 513 for the fencing course. Professor Ariel adds that their ticket gives only the most crucial facts, but it's nothing to be worried about as the process is the same each year. She also confirms that the academy doesn't care about one's age or gender, their nationality or class. In other words, they quite simply don't give a flying fuck if you're an assault helicopter or not. They don't even care enough to know their names. The candidates who are destined to pass will be requested for extra information, but for the whole examinees here, it doesn't matter. Professor Ariel even says that it's fine if they submit a bogus identity, once more confirming the institution doesn't care. Anyway, trouble finds our boy again, because he came here without his sword today, and yet he's placed in the fencing course. It makes him question the system's validity. Professor Ariel continues, comically revealing that she allocated each participant a subject based on their attractiveness. I know she's meant to be insightful or whatever, but it's just weird how 1 minute before she was talking about discrimination, and then she goes on to say this. Ariel is comfortable with amending course specifics in case she got the wrong. Even the examinees consider that it's hard to assign a course based on appearance alone, especially when there's so many of them. They firmly assume that the school must have investigated them beforehand, so that's how they know. The notion of mind-reading magic also comes up. Professor Ariel doesn't answer any of their concerns. All she's observing is how no one is grumbling about the given course. So next, she chooses to expose everyone's exam schedule. The detail is inscribed on the ticket immediately. Gray is concerned because he's set to have his exam on the first day, without allowing him any time to let his arm heal. Ariel reveals that this exam will only be conducted once, and it will decide everything. If a candidate is late, swift disqualification will be the sole option. She also reminds them that their schedules are stringent and won't be modified or challenged upon request. It's awful news for Gray, who is battling with his recuperation. He's hoping for his body to pull a miracle and heal him tomorrow. The next day approaches, and what do you know? Poor guy's arm didn't even heal a bit. He's got no choice but to take the exam in this state. Gray's examinee number is called, and he frustratingly comes forth. He attempts to relax himself in an effort to remain optimistic about the scenario. Assessing his left arm, he doesn't appear to have any troubles, and he can also move his right arm if he applies enough muscle. His current method is to sharply monitor the examiner's moves and discover a winning plan from that. He's watching a match between a candidate and an examiner. The applicant blindly rushes to strike, but by the end of his attack, the examiner is unaffected and nonchalantly waits, waiting for his next move. The candidate drags his sword for yet another swipe, but even that strike is useless. It gets blocked, and not just that. The examiner deflects his blade before sending him flying with a final stroke. With his body striking the ground, the examiner finishes the conclusion of the exam, telling him to quit the premises. You guys might be thinking that maybe Gray has found something, but the amusing part is how this man actually gives up and accepts that he's about to get his ass roasted. His number is called to come into the arena. Gray evaluates his possibilities, understanding that he certainly can't beat an examiner that annihilated a candidate even bigger than him. Inside the arena, our youngster is afforded the freedom to make the initial move. Despite that, he fully recognizes that this conflict will be one-sided. Even then, he's got to make some kind of impression. The action begins with Gray racing to strike. He remembers his master's guidance, who instructed him to make use of his complete body to deliver a potent slash rather than just using his arms. He thinks that the only way he can live with the loss of his right arm is to use his other muscles instead. And so he delivers the first swing, which the examiner effortlessly dodges. Even today, Gray finds himself struggling to fight in his typical technique. After all, even though he's trying to make up for his right arm, it still doesn't change the reality that he's at a major disadvantage here. The examiner retaliates by trying to chop him down. But to Gray's astonishment, the sword is going far too slow. It's as if he can read its course without needing to hustle. So our boy really blocks the strike successfully, yet feeling the weight of the examiner's force behind the attack. At the same time, he assesses that the examiner's technique isn't as developed as Saria. So if he can simply focus on the tactics he learned from her, there's a chance he may be able to seize an opportunity and cut an opening. With that tactic in mind, Gray charges in full force in an effort to overwhelm the instructor. Oh, and the instructor is actually being pushed back. His speed is his own demise. Gray finds himself feeling confident, understanding that he can easily take down this examiner. The words of his teacher flood through his thoughts again. Their swords meet once more, but Gray overwhelms his opponent with a complete deflect, determined to finish the war with his new confidence. Gray resumed his unrelenting onslaught, while the teacher tried his hardest to grab control of the tempo. Although our child had seen through the opponent's technique, countering it with a handicap is still a tough undertaking. He utilized the speed difference and snuck a straight stab, only to get curved. The contrast in raw power was simply too much. Breaking the instructor's form is easier said than done with two hands, let alone one. With that said, Gray's aggression was turning the nerd's motions rougher bit by bit. It might be a bit dangerous, but he can try his luck here. With a clear objective in mind, Gray let the teacher push him to the edge of the platform, exposing a big gap in defense. As expected, Glasses grabbed the bait and attacked for a finishing strike. The teacher fell for the oldest trick in the book. He made a wide-open swing as Gray anticipated. The young warrior changed his stance and let the swing come. Nothing is more likely to disclose an opening than a reckless and greedy push. A broad and predictable swing was precisely what he needed to maximize his speed advantage. In an instant, He reached the instructor's unprotected side. No matter how vast the disparity in power is, you can't fight against a brutal attack from behind. Milliseconds away from plunging his sword for the win, the referee stepped in to indicate the end of the fight. Gray held back and lowered his blade. The match is over, yet it felt a touch too short. With the time restriction for the exam elapsed, the referee announced the fight's conclusion as a tie. The young man grits his teeth in frustration. He failed. After all the hard work he put in, he could not get it done. He clutched his trusty blade fiercely for a time before loosening his hold. Gray went away from the stage and accepted the result with dignity. He did his best. If he can't even win against an instructor, injury or not, his grandiose aspirations are farther than he thought. Looking at the positive side, his arm should be cured by next year, so he can be at 100% for a repeat of the entrance exam. No matter the result, this was a valuable experience deserved of thanks. A week has gone since Gray almost lost the win versus the glasses guy. Today, the World Union Academy teachers gathered in meeting room 53 to discuss the entrance exam results. White-haired Gramps opened the discussion by letting his colleagues openly share their thoughts on this year's batch. Immediately, groans of complaints flooded the room. For this year, they designed a technique for every professor to observe the tests together. It was really inefficient and tedious. Of course, there are others who like the format. They cannot afford to disregard a potential talent just for the sake of the faculty's convenience after all. Gramps moved the topic away from the exam system and back to the optimistic pupils. Starting with the swordsmanship course, he summoned magical records of every examinee to evaluate those who passed one last time. Naturally, those who outrightly beat the tester passed. Those who could not get the task done will be evaluated based on the attributes they demonstrated and how they held out during those 15 minutes of conflict. Other than those that swept the floor with the teacher, they narrowed down the notable candidates to numbers 5, 217, and 753. Everybody agreed to draw the line with just those three. If they add additional inferior skills, those poor youngsters would not be able to keep up in class. No one contested the line drawn. Therefore, the successful applicants for the swordsmanship course have been confirmed and locked in, or at least it was meant to be, until a humorous voice brought up candidate number 513. Gray Lee. It came from none other than the fascinating red-haired Professor Ariel. Since she specified an unusual number, the other professors pulled up the film. They had to concede that given another second, the young guy would have likely won, but he relied on putting up traps only to beat an examiner. The academy might be too demanding for the guy. Those with skilled eyes for swordsmanship could observe the solid technique, the lack of power, and the evident mismatch from the start until the end. In conclusion, the teachers of the swordsmanship course dismissed the idea of accepting candidate 513 to the school. While they were busy insulting the youngsters' shortcomings, Professor Ariel blared at her coworkers like they were idiot bums. Every single person in this room saw the tape, yet not a single one of them recognized what she'd done. If everyone's thus blind, maybe the exam's format really is a waste of time. The day after the final deliberation, the examinees were called back to the town square. They were tasked to convene at 11 in the morning. Tensions were high, and everyone was expecting to obtain the coveted acceptance. The time has finally come. An academy official proudly proclaimed that 6 candidates had passed the swordsmanship training. Everyone gripped their slips and prayed to be one of the 6. The first ones called were prospects number 5 and 217. Immediately, their paper slips burnt to nothing. Next were applicants number 432, 615, 753, and 925. That is all. Out of hundreds, just 6 were skilled enough to get accepted to the world's most elite training institute. Gray came today with a little bit of hope, only to get absolutely shattered by the fact that he might not be good enough. The successful candidates were asked to cross the bridge and finish the enrolling procedure by the end of the day. Those that passed were understandably pleased and excited to embrace the life of an elite. Those that flopped gazed down in disappointment, wallowing in their defeat. With the swordsmanship course out of the way, the representative shockingly stated that one examinee has been selected by the Divine Eyes Special Admission. Of course, it's none other than candidate number 513, Gray Mother-freaking Lee. His paper slip burned a different tint than the ones that came before him. The vivid blue flame inevitably drew everyone's attention. Just when he feared he would have to practice and recover his injury for another year, Gray was given a pass. Other candidates around him mockingly chuckled at hearing the mention of the Divine Eye unique entrance. Gray had no idea what he had just gotten into. This is the first time he had ever heard about this Divine Eye enterprise. Almost everyone thinks this as a bogus admittance, just a ruse to get someone undeserving via a backdoor, a symptom of World Union Academy's downfall. Hearing the caustic discussion around him, Gray did not like the sound of being dubbed a backdoor student. He pondered how he was even selected when he didn't have any relevant contacts. His master could not possibly have this type of pull at the academy. While the failures were insulting the one individual admitted by the Divine Eye, a bald elderly hermit scolded them for disregarding a long-standing custom. The way the bald hermit sees it, this admission is an esteemed category that has produced innumerable heroes for over a century already. As expected, the failures also criticized the hermit for being behind the times. Sure, the Divine Eye was heralded as the birthing location of heroes back in the day, but not anymore. Recent Divine Eye hopefuls include Amy White, Bella Albright, Leek Muller, and Jacob Bloomfield. These four have one thing in common. Everyone regards them as full and utter failures. But we previously heard their names. In the near future, Amy White will ascend to become the Sword Saint, Bella Albright would become the Great Sage, and Jacob Bloomfield would take on the mantle of the Divine Archer. These three would reach the zenith of their craft as the major force opposing the Liquidator. Now, Graylee's name will be mentioned with these legends. Those who passed were greeted and provided with uniforms to change into. The admission ceremony will shortly commence, and the rookies must meet in the square in front of the main office. Gray tried his new drip-on, and it was a perfect fit. His black blazer, inlaid with gold and the Academy's crest, was clean as hell. He transitioned from feeling dejected to feeling stylish alongside his batchmates. When they approached the square, some of the rookies were perplexed. There was nothing in there. The uncertainty was sorted up as an Academy staff member ran towards them with an apologetic expression. He said that there's been a bit of a delay putting up the ceremony owing to a mix-up. Thankfully, it won't take long to correct it. To do so, the newbies must step back a little farther so the setup may be placed. The rookies followed the staff member's directions and watched with mistrust. Mr. Staff kneeled down and started tampering with the ground. After a little bit of preparation, he touched the floor and triggered a large magic circle in the blink of an eye. Out of nowhere, hundreds of seats arranged in a coliseum design materialized from the magic circle. The rookies were stunned. They had never seen sorcery of this size before. In only a few seconds, the plaza converted into a genuine stadium, replete with seats and a stage. Mr. Staff apologized for the delay once more and asked the newbies to sit wherever they wished. Still stunned by the ludicrous show of sorcery, they followed suit. Some of the more knowledgeable rookies detected the use of teleportation magic to physically produce an arena. Gray quietly took a seat in the middle row. He reckoned that this was the Academy's approach of having a big entry ceremony near the school building. They are basically stretching the might of the World Union Academy. Once everyone was seated, some rookies observed that the amount of seats was a bit excessive. There were just 30 of them in attendance, however there were hundreds of seats. Well, that's because, as the Planet Union Academy's name says, this institute gathers the cream of the crop from all around the planet. If you gaze up in the sky, you will see what that truly means. Dozens of airships and dragon carriages swooped overhead, blanketing the sun. Looking skyward, Gray recognized the biggest magic airship as the Strata Queen. He had once boarded this massive beast when he was cannon fodder for the Liquidator subjugation team. It certainly lives up to its reputation. Bringing out something so big for a simple entrance ceremony is just another tactic to flex on rookies. The World Union Academy clearly knows how to flaunt its dominance. Once every ship had landed safely, students who passed the tough entrance exam in their own corners of the planet stepped out. They snatched the remaining seats, filling up the stands. With everyone gathered, it's time to get started. The staff member who generated the arena heralded the start of the remainder of their existence. After all the flamboyant shows of influence, the entrance exam continued with a brief speech courtesy of the headmaster. Gray was feeling a little bored in his seat. Even though he's joining the most prestigious academy in the world, this whole event felt like just another tedious assembly. Next up, the headmaster called the top pupils from each course to the platform. The guy sitting beside Gray rose up. Blondie's name is Leonhardt, the top student in the swordsmanship course. As he confidently descended the stairs, Talk about his astounding achievement of overcoming the examiner in an instant started to spread. Some even argue that this newbie is already as proficient as any of the professors when it comes to swordplay. Leonhard Appius seems like he's a spy entrusted with building a phony family with an assassin and a little girl who can read minds. Gray was not impressed, just a little interested. Before starting his statement, Leonhard clarified that he was authorized to speak freely from the heart. Once given the go signal, he turned to his fellow rookies with a stern stare. He launched his remarks by registering a formal complaint to the school. First of all, he congratulated his peers who were admitted the proper manner. He sees it as a big honor to be among the finest of the best of the current age. Leonhard hopes that they all graduate as persons capable of making meaningful contributions to the world. For that, they must work together. He looks forward to the day when he and his peers soar as proud students of the esteemed World Union Academy. With that out of the way, he pointed out that there was someone among us, someone who doesn't deserve to be in this plaza at all. He conveyed this complaint straight to Professor Ariel, who handles the privileged admissions of the Divine Eye. She was extremely astonished to be called out by a freshman on the first day of courses. Professor Ariel said that every single student here had passed the tough exam. They may not be as dominant as Leonhardt, but they showed that they should belong. Curious and fascinated, she questioned the smug rookie why he was yapping like a little bitch. Without mincing his words, Leonhardt bluntly brought up the mystery applicant who got admitted through an antiquated backdoor mechanism. Like everyone else, he regards the Divine Eye special admittance as just a ploy to get underqualified pupils into the institution. Leonhardt yelled that the specially admitted student should just show themselves, return the respectable uniform, and leave in humiliation. His remarks and decisiveness seemed to move the other rookies. Meanwhile, the one being singled out was trying to not stand out. Thankfully, the angry overachiever doesn't recognize Gray's face. If he just remains silent, he shouldn't be in trouble. Professor Ariel had to step in and diffuse the tension, applauding this year's group for their energy. Refusing to stand down, Leonhardt doubled back on his ideas against admitting students through an outmoded course. Growing a little frustrated with Blondie, Professor Ariel ominously inquired whether he was confident that he could beat the boy she selected for her course. Leon had to take a few steps back upon feeling the pressure from the enigmatic professor. He attempted to stammer or reply, but he couldn't. Gritting his teeth and composing himself, Leonhard boldly stated that he could beat the dog's excrement out of that unqualified kid. Ariel was already expecting such a reaction. She liked boys with attitude, so she suggested a wager. She would voluntarily put her job on the line and that kid's future in this academy at stake. Gray doesn't like that sound of that bet at all. Leonhardt asked whether this wager would be a straight-up brawl with the special admittance youngster. But Professor Ariel wouldn't do such a boring and impolite thing. She's also certain that if her boy goes all out, little Leon would end up dead in a ditch. As an instructor, she can't possibly put a talented student's life at jeopardy. Her remarks ripped through Leonhardt's pride like a hot knife through butter. If she was trying to anger bait him into making a bet, it surely worked. Professor Ariel proposed that they make the wager on monster subjugation instead. That way, it will be a little safer for every party involved. Besides, she understands that Leonhardt thrives at fighting monsters more than against humans. The details are basic. Both participants must slay the monsters she names as targets. Each round, the target monster will rise in strength. Whoever gives up first and fails to subdue the target loses. If her boy loses, she will cheerfully retire from her prestigious job as professor, and she will expel every special admission student under her care. But if tiny Leon loses, he'll have to do anything she wants. I know a lot of you would accept being red-hair professor's slave in a hurry. Before accepting, Leonhardt wondered what the first target monster would be. Although he's certain that he can manage and execute any opponent, he'd like not be caught up in some odd thing. After a little thinking, she came up with the perfect first target. She wants the head of an ogre general on her desk. If it's too easy for young Leon, she would gladly increase the challenge. But based on the crowd's reaction, there's no need for that. While everyone was calling her demands over the top, Gray was attempting to figure out why she would choose an ogre general. Specifically, a creature he had already vanquished. Leon, on the other hand, smashed his fist on the podium. He fiercely contended that an ogre general is not a monster that someone can tame on a solo run. Seeing Blondie protest, she lowered the challenge and set the time frame for the whole year. Little Leon still refused to play along. He suggested that if someone could single-handedly kill a disaster-level monster with just a year of training, humans wouldn't suffer. If they want to go through with this ludicrous bet, this pussy demanded a more reasonable aim. Then, he got it through his head that this cunning woman purposefully chose a monster no one can defeat, so they can conclude the bet without a clear winner. Since he continued on whining, Professor Ariel caved and added one additional stipulation to the bet. If it concludes in a draw, little Leon wins. In other words, if her boy fails to defeat the ogre general within a year, she will cheerfully stand down and deport all her exceptional students. With all the stipulations to give Leon as much benefit as possible, he will look like a wuss if he still declines. Knockoff Lloyd Forger has to know that he's being played here, and the outcome is already decided. But he was swept by the professor's deception, driven to accept a seemingly ironclad wager. For the record, he questioned if a weakened or damaged General Ogre would count. It goes without saying that the monster has to be in its natural fighting shape. To seal the bargain, the eye under the professor's monocle sparkled as her magic fashioned a contract. Every detail has been listed and engraved in the mystical contract. All little Leon has to do is sign it if he's ready. With the entire faculty and every other freshman as witnesses, he readily signed his name on the archaic document. After settling the agreement, he nervously wondered if the boy admitted through the back door could truly win. Professor Ariel didn't bother giving him a clear response. The other professors quietly watched in their seats, presumably used to the old red-haired raccoon's hijinks. They all perceive her as a wizard well past her prime, bored, and just doing odd stuff for shits and grins. In his seat, Gray sighed in despair as the gamble to determine his destiny was officialized out of his control. He also noted that she purposefully wrote the restrictions to include the ogre general he murdered in the time frame. This bet was a done deal the moment it began. Professor Ariel played Leon and everyone else, and Gray was the only one who saw it. She sure plays rough, but having someone like that on your corner is a tremendous boon. After the bet incident, the admission ceremony completed, and the rookies were poured into their first lesson, the basics of magic. The professor in charge of the class recognized that it's a bit odd to start a lecture on the very first day of classes. He wanted his students to become used to this pace. In this academy, they cannot afford to waste a single day. Today they will start with the most fundamental of basics, the simple application of magic. Within a human's body lies an unseen energy called ether. One may manipulate the magic circuits in the body and tap into untold levels of power. Gray was initially apprehensive that he wouldn't be able to keep up with the classes, but this first lecture appeared manageable. He previously heard the same explanations back at the enslavement boot camp. Nevertheless, he was unlucky with his class assignment. Out of all the introductory classes in magic, he ended up in the same class as Leonhard Apius. If people find out that he's the despised Divine Eye special admittance student, he may kiss his peace goodbye. While he was deep in thought, the professor noticed and singled him out for looking bored with the lecture. The lecturer felt insulted that a newbie was already looking away less than 5 minutes into his introductory session. Gray quickly apologized for his straying look. Still, he felt it unusual that the professor singled him out even though he was all the way in the very back of the lecture hall. The professor intensified the situation and demanded a demonstration from the distracted student. If he appears bored in an introductory lesson, that must mean he can utilize basic magic, right? Gray wasn't easy to bully. Respectfully, he asserted that he specializes in swordsmanship. He thought it would be all right if he couldn't utilize magic. The professor screamed that even if one employs a sword in a genuine conflict, a fighter still needs to understand the basics to cooperate with an ally wizard. Learning the foundations of magic and grasping how it feels is the least a swordsman can do. At that time, Gray remembered hearing the same thing from the boot camp lectures. Today's lesson might close with the same spell. To confirm, he asked if today's class is geared toward mastering the basic yet effective ether bullet. Since he knows the name, the professor assumed that he could use it. Gray thanked the heavens for the brutal boot camp he had to slog through. Since this would be a good opportunity for a real demonstration, the professor decided to make this a one-on-one match and called this year's top swordsman Leon up to the stage. Blondie gladly stood up and paid his respects to the professor. With that said, he revealed that he was trained in sword and magic before he even attended school, so it could be a little risky for a normie to go up against him. The lecturer claimed that no matter how vast the talent disparity is, ether bullets are non-lethal, so there's no need to hold back. In addition, he stated that Gray is this year's Divine Eye student, knowing how much Leon despises the nameless backdoor pupil. Every student in the lecture hall turned to Gray, cementing his face to their memories. This was a setup from the very start. He couldn't even get through the day without being doxxed by a freaking professor. That old fart purposely betrayed his identity with malevolent intent. Hearing that he has an opportunity to put a genuine bullet through the guy he hates, Leon quickly accepted to show a backdoor baby the ropes. This is an opportunity to demonstrate an unqualified outsider what kind of place World Union Academy actually is. With his veins bulging out in wrath, he commanded that Gray step the fuck down. This is not how our boy's first day was meant to go. In the stage, they stood opposite each other as the shit-stirrer professor presented the rules. He will provide a signal, and both parties will shoot ether bullets at their opponent. Gray just spent a few days practicing basic magic at the boot camp. Sure, the lecturer said that the bullets are not lethal, but that doesn't mean they would not hurt. As soon as the go signal was given, Leon Hart grabbed a huge amount of ether in his hands, intending to display the difference in strength between a real and false student. Pushed to the corner and forced to protect himself, Gray also gathered and manipulated his ether, throwing his existing knowledge into one desperate try. The whole lecture hall fell silent when they laid eyes upon a gigantic black hole, threatening to swallow a minuscule little bullet. Both Leon and Gray were stunned. Neither of them expected this stuff. As expected, the small ether bullet was entirely swallowed by the seething black hole. Leon's anxiety was visible in his eyes as the obviously lethal spell inches closer to him. In a panic, the professor lifted his palm and did his hardest to avoid the worst-case situation using his own power. A golden barrier prevented the seemingly persistent progress of the anomalous ether bullet. It managed to soften most of the force driving the onslaught, but it was a very close call. He made the mistake of letting up, and the golden barrier started exhibiting deadly fissures under pressure. Eventually, the ether bullet black hole reached its limit and detonated, shattering the magic barrier into a million little bits of light. The following boom threw the lecture audience into disarray. Rookies closed their eyes and prepared themselves for hit. As for the target himself, young Leon was knocked down on his ass, screaming bloody murder. Realizing that he messed up, the professor instantly hurried towards the swordsmanship course's emerging star to make sure he's all right. Leon lifted himself back up, wiped the dust, and told the professor that he was okay. After establishing Blondie's well-being, the professor turned his attention to the one who almost blew the whole building up. Had the barrier failed to reduce the impact, that aberrant ether bullet may have killed Leon and damaged many. Even amongst veteran magic professors, no one could cast an ether bullet that strong in the academy. He badly wanted to know what the young man did to make such a terrible result. Gray himself was confused. What he just unleashed was obviously on another level compared to the pathetic being that his opponent hurled. Could the spell he learned as part of the subjugation squad differ from the one that they teach at the academy? He questioned the professor if he had botched up in any way, but the geezer was very positive that what he shot was absolutely an ether bullet. The only noticeable difference was the quality of the spell. What Gray just used to juice up the spell was not typical ether. That scale and power can only be reached through the usage of super compressed ether. None of the rookies had heard, let alone understood, the word. Super compressed ether is something that even experienced professors have problems making and studying. Yet this contentious student easily utilized it to alter a fundamental spell. No one in this academy can replicate that. Now the students are starting to feel respect and a touch of dread for the individual who has been entered via the divine eye. They also claim that Gray should have been enrolled in the magic course instead. As far as he remembers, all spells mastered by the subjugation team were precisely like the one he just used. Among the group, Gray was one of those who had no talent for it. Still, unwilling to believe that he's using some sort of juiced-up ether, he summoned another ether bullet and argued that pulling off something like this is achievable for anyone with enough skill. Much to his confusion, the professor just chuckled like a crazy in return. Gray wasn't sure what to do, so he just stood there dumbfoundedly. The lecturer switched his tone entirely. At the outset of the lesson, he was clearly unfriendly. Now he's trying to lure the special admission student into the magic course. Gray gently declined the warm invitation. He was always told that he had no knack for magic, so he couldn't see himself getting into it now. The professor thought this rejection absurd. If a young man who can make super compressed ether through compression is talentless, then everyone else should just quit magic. He even went as far as declaring Gray an exceptional genius, even by the academy standard. Whoever suggested that the kid had no gift for magic must be smoking some illegal substances. The rookies watched the incident in quiet. They observed how the rigorous professor morphed into an entirely different person as he urgently tried to get Gray to shift into the magic department. From his perspective, it would be a big loss for the world if Gray didn't pursue magic. Hell, it would be a crime against the arcane. With all the glazing going his way, all the young man could do was giggle at the absurdity. Then he remembered hearing the term ether compression technique once before. It was simply another clear day at the boot camp, and one of the heroes was holding a lesson. She detailed how in the past, people didn't realize OD, sometimes known as life force, existed. Due to such gap in understanding, it was incredibly difficult to cast proper magic. One must continuously compress ether within the body to create the desired result through a spell. This rudimentary approach only gathers a tiny bit of OD. Miss Lecturer, Bella Albright, the great sage and the strongest magician of the future, thought the manner they practiced magic just a decade ago ludicrous. Gray asked the lecturer whether he had ever heard of OD. The question baffled the old guy. He was not familiar with the term at all. It sounds like the world still hasn't discovered this innovative magic concept at this point in time. If that's the case, then the basic information Gray learned in the subjugation squad can be considered knowledge from the future. He finally recognized that he must be careful not to release this type of information. For one last time, he rebuffed the continuous offer to switch to a different course. His true love is the sword, thus he would have to pass. The professor sighed in defeat and helplessly accepted the young man's decision to continue with blades. But he also left Gray an open door, welcome to transfer residences anytime he feels like it. Feeling the headache building on, the young man clumsily thanked the exuberant geezer for the great offer. After that demonstration, both individuals were instructed to go back to their seats. The lecturer swore to never chide Gray anymore during class. In fact, he wouldn't mind if the kid went if he ever became bored. The professor says that this baby stuff is way too basic for a prodigy like Gray. Gray descended the stairs while subjected to harsh glares. Now he's ascending with reverence from the professor and his peers. Meanwhile, his victim was still standing on the shattered stage, flushing and feeling his lion heart beating hard for Lord Gray. He didn't see how Lionheart looked down there, but Gray certainly felt the chill coming up his spine. After the first lecture, he received a personal note from Professor Ariel, requesting him to come at her office after classes. He basically got summoned out of the blue. It would be troublesome if old Professor Carlos were behind this sudden call. After walking around for a few minutes, he eventually reached the office door that bears the mark of the heavenly eye. He prepared to knock, but the door softly opened, gently letting him in. Taking the unlocked door as an invitation, Gray gently entered while expressing courteous greetings. Before he could finish his sentence, he sensed a sharp blade approaching his way from the side. Gray's reflexes automatically kicked in as he pulled his sword to defend. The grip was a little unorthodox, but it got the job done in a pinch. He was able to sweep the sneak attack and the attacker away. With the intruder swatted away, Gray understood that he had moved completely on instinct this time around. He wanted to confront the aggressor, but it was merely a blue-haired young woman who couldn't even handle the blade in her hand properly. Upon closer glance, Gray realized that he knew this girl all too well. This shorty will become an indestructible pillar of humanity and optimism in the future. Gray's attention was immediately divided to the desk in the back of the office, and the woman seated on it commended his swift answer. Professor Ariel was thrilled to discover that her eyes were right on when he examined the young man in the entrance exam. There were two other guys in the room, Ariel's colleagues, professors, who were still suspicious of the new addition to the divine sight. They judged Bella's motions as excellent, but her sword was knocked out of her grasp entirely too quickly. Hearing the name, Gray's past life memory of the Supreme Mage came pouring back. Who would have expected that the sorceress would appear so quaint in her early years? Meanwhile, Ariel is hassling her coworkers to just accept that they were wrong instead of making excuses. In the end, the other professors ponied up and gave their gambling addict coworker her earnings. They witnessed the split-second interaction in the door and had to admit that Gray was here for a cause. Confused and uneasy, the young man inquired what was going and why he was brought on. Ariel simply stated that they were betting on whether the new kid could fend off a surprise attack from Bella or not. Thanks to that, she made some decent money today. As thanks, she tossed a portion of her winnings to her new student. He instantly caught the coin and discovered a sparkling gold piece in his hand. A single gold coin is practically a little fortune. Although they admittedly lost the wager, the other professors also pointed up a major detail they had missed in the entrance exam. From that exchange earlier, they became clear that the young man purposefully avoided utilizing his dominant arm to defend. It was almost as if he was trying to defend an unmoving arm. The most likely explanation for the peculiarity would be an injury, but rather than an apparent physical injury to the muscles that any professor would see through. This kid is suffering from a deeper form of wound. A small injury would not lead someone to tighten up in such an unfamiliarly hostile attack. Gray was amazed that the professors had predicted so many details properly just by observing him draw his blade to defend. Well, they are educators in the most prominent educational institution for a reason. Though they were slower to notice compared to Ariel, they nevertheless inferred a clear picture. With that being said, Ariel shooed her coworkers away now that she had their money. They lost out on a remarkable find, and she won't give Gray up. For now, the professors would cheerfully concede that the kid had potential. But if that wound doesn't heal and continues to fester, Gray will stay as the individual who failed to reach the Academy's standard, but was accepted anyhow. He did not like the frightening cut of that professor's tongue at all. When the dubious professors departed the office, just Ariel and her pupils remained inside. With the nuisances out of the way, it's time to start the main agenda of this summons. She phoned him today to discuss the issue of magic. After delivering some aromatic tea, Professor Ariel recounted what she heard happened in Professor Carlos's class. She discovered out from the man himself. That relentless moron burst into her office, demanding the new kid's transfer to the magic course. She certainly denied such a ludicrous request. In her scrutinizing eyes, Gray would become a much scarier beast, wielding a sword rather than magic. Upon removing her monocle to expound on what she meant by saying, Gray was stunned. Professor Ariel doesn't see signs of a genius in magic compression at all. He doesn't even exhibit symptoms of having practiced magic on a deeper level. Gray felt a little disturbed after getting scanned and read like an open book with that odd sight. Seeing his lying would be completely pointless in this scenario. Gray admitted that everything of what she speculated was right. Curious, she softly asked whether he would be ready to explain the trick used to conjure that black hole ether bullet. She offered complete discretion and a payment in exchange for that crucial info. She truly wanted to know about this potential concept for Bella's sake. While sipping on tea, Gray's tongue almost slipped and called the little Bella by her future title. Professor Ariel described the young woman a pure genius when it comes to magic theory, lacking the means to wield what she can postulate. For some inexplicable reason, she has no capacity to use ether compression, let alone the mythical supercompression. Based on some loose knowledge from the future, he understood that Bella Albright was a late bloomer. Her lack of aptitude in the practical department must be the reason. Ariel planned this meeting up after she heard about the hypercompressed ether bullet that nearly killed Leon. If there is a way to employ supercompressed ether without the inefficient act of internal compression, it would be a game changer. Professor Ariel is desperate for solutions. She doesn't want to see one of her girls sent to Professor Bradley. Everyone in the future would know that accursed. It's hard not to be aware of an incredibly infamous grade A bastard. He conducted innumerable independent human experiments for the aim of improving his field, murdering many in the process. On top of that, he would produce massive magic disasters that would claim the lives of tens of thousands. Professor Bradley is history's worst magic criminal in existence. In this period, the psychotic mass-murdering magical terrorist hasn't been apprehended yet. If Bella can't synthesize highly compressed ether by the end of the year, she will be sent to the insane professor to undergo a high-risk surgery. Anyone with basic sense would perceive this as a horrible idea. Professor Ariel could not agree more. Though the procedure is under the premise of boosting magic talents, it's merely obvious human experimentation with no guarantee. It hasn't been made public yet, but she's already hearing whispers of the lunatic's cruel crimes. Some victims have died, while others were left damaged beyond hope. Bella chimed in that, although it's risky and scary, she will be expelled before the end of the year if she doesn't produce any results. At all honesty, Professor Ariel would rather have her girl stop magic at the academy for good than have that perv tamper with Bella's body. Gray quietly deliberated. He possesses magic theories that do not exist yet. If he communicates something so drastic, the flow of history will utterly deviate off track. He observed young Bella clenching her fists in despair and terror. Gray remembered his dying moments facing the liquidator. That irritation, dread, and hopelessness are much too familiar. He was only cannon fodder prepared to fall in one shot, a powerless bystander while the heroes who were supposed to save the planet were cut apart like fresh meat. Knowing the future waiting for him if he doesn't make some steps, why would he not want to affect the course of history? That hellhole people call the future is much better off changed. By the time his tea was completed, he had agreed to attempt to teach Bella as best as he could. She will be utilizing highly compressed ether in no time. After the meeting, the three headed to the arena as the sun began to drop. Gray busted out the chalkboard and tried his best to describe what he learned from the boot camp lessons. After extracting every ounce that he could recall, he asked the females to preserve this special information within themselves. Information leaks won't be a problem since the professor created a magic contract beforehand. Those who break the deal shall perish. After giving them the details, Gray inquired what they thought of the theory. Just understanding about the motion of OD alone was enough to blow Professor Ariel's mind, but the knowledge of magic he showed is even more insane. Bella commended his explanation as succinct yet well-planned. She felt like she was listening to a lecture about magic from hundreds of years in the future. With Bella simply hearing and absorbing the info dump, the history of magic has advanced by 100 years in this room. She was bragging about increasing magic by a century, yet Gray himself learned all these basic principles from the grown-up sorceress just 10 years from now. It's a monument to her genius. There was a lot of material that even Professor Ariel failed to judge and absorb properly, so she deferred to her little magic prodigy. According to Bella's rough calculation, there's a good possibility that the theory is sound. None of the notions contradict the current magic theory that the world is running on, but the simplest way to find out for sure is to test it out. That's why they occupied the arena in the first place. If the premise holds truth, the spell Bella hurriedly cooked up on the move should work. Holding a staff in her two hands, she placed her belief in Gray's teachings and tapped into her entire power. That doesn't sound like a nice idea. If he remembers rightly, Bella Albright's strength is believed to be capable of burning an entire city down in an instant. She's essentially a weapon of mass destruction. Moreover, she was noted for having no good control over her strong magic output. Today must be the day he witnesses that famous display of domination. Even Bella was astonished to see what she just kicked off. A massive inferno of scorching fire blasted out and escaped from the middle of the stadium and into the heavens. Gray tried to warn her against this hazardous proposal, but it was too late. The pillar of flame stood tall, with the young wizard at its foundation, holding up an intimidating magic circle. This enormous power stood at the pinnacle of magic in his prior incarnation. If Bella hadn't taken control of the spell a single second earlier, he would have been consumed by the blaze. That excellent elemental manipulation literally saved his life. Oblivious of other people's fear, Bella was beaming with glee. She finally did it. She bridged the gap between her theoretical and practical talents. Pushing herself even harder, she proceeded to tame the blazing pillar, sculpting it into the shape of a screaming fiery dragon. For the first time in her life, she found magic fun. She was swept by the occasion and rapidly gassed herself out. The flames petered out, and she felt the drawback of her test right away as her ether reserves dried up. Her legs gave up, and she lost consciousness. The staff slid to the floor, and so did her body. Worried, Gray hurried up to the unconscious female while the professor encouraged him to relax out. This collapse was a classic case of ether depletion. All Bella needs is a little bit of rest, and she'll be back to 100% in no time. Hearing that assuaged Gray's anxieties. Still, even Ariel was amazed by the wonderful exhibition of magical talent the young woman displayed. She might be the only person who can put together magic on that scale after learning a new topic. While utterly out of it, the dosing wizard whispered that it's not she who is amazing, but the theory. Gray provided her the means to quickly produce her own super-compressed ether. Well, that was a tool she was intended to develop in the future. Ariel sighed in relief. Bella no longer needs that dubious surgery from that obscure criminal. She would cheerfully curse Bradley off herself. The professor was delighted to see the young mage avoid a destructive path. She's especially grateful that she did not lose her magic control through some unsanctioned experiment. Although Bradley's specific procedures were found to improve one's magical production, they come at the sacrifice of control. Exactly how it works is a mystery, but it's quite likely that the lunatic found a technique to physically breach a person's limiter. Now it makes sense why the sorceress in the prior world was thought to be an out-of-control weapon of mass destruction. In any event, today's huge progress would not have been achieved without Gray's help. The stipulations of their contract have been met. It's the professor's turn to fulfill her commitments written on the magic paper. There's a magic spell in her repertoire that might help. Extending her fingers out, she conjured innumerable translucent butterflies formed of pure ether. They soared all around the arena as she softly caressed her student's hand. To touch, the ether around the region swirled and churned, gathering onto the point of connection. For a few seconds, Gray embraced the healing touch openly. Afterwards, he tried squeezing his wounded hand and noted a huge improvement in comfort compared to previously. He can finally move his dominant hand again. It was a big improvement. With his spirits up, he enthusiastically thanked the professor for overcoming one of his biggest concerns. Not even a mystical healing potion could cure his mystery injury. However, her soft touch accomplished the work. She boasted that her nerve-restoring magic shouldn't even be mentioned in the same sentence as normal magic-mending potions. Before they got carried away, she wanted to be sure that he was actually back to 100%. To test it, Gray needs to attempt swinging a sword to find out. For the first time in a long time, he touched the hilt of his blade with his dominant hand. He executed a rapid draw and slashed the blade lightly. Right away, he observed something unsettling despite the apparent full recuperation of his arm. To confirm, he lowered his posture and went through the movements of his swordplay to check how it felt. Much to his dismay, his right arm doesn't feel like it glides as fluidly as it used to. Professor Ariel expected something like this to happen. She may have rebuilt the nerves to their pristine state, but her magic can't heal the wounds in the young man's spirit. Hearing her remark, the soul perplexed Gray. While today's magic knowledge hasn't confirmed the existence of the human soul, Ariel is a fervent believer that it does exist. After all, she can see it with this extraordinary eye of hers. Hiding below that sparkly monocle is an all-seeing eye that could see through everything. Right now, she can watch Gray's soul steadily repairing itself over time. She hypothesized that as long as he doesn't overexert himself, he will heal naturally. He innocently wondered if practicing his swordplay would count as overexertion. The lecturer said that it doesn't. He can train normally. Rather than that, she asked him what type of swordsmanship he practiced that could injure one's spirit so horribly. Then again, swordplay that uses one's soul as fuel is not a new idea. In fact, she knows a certain someone who has the same skill. Amy White is another student of the Divine Eye Special Entrance course. She reckoned that there must be some relationship between these two students of hers. Gray was frightened and perplexed as to why Professor Ariel would think that way. He hasn't even encountered the future sword saint in this timeline. Ariel assumed that Gray knew Amy based on the way he wielded his sword. It gives the idea that he learnt it from that sword nerd. On second consideration, the professor did observe some tiny variances. It felt like the person he learnt swordplay from was a lot more proficient version of Tiny Amy. She predicts that in a few years, Amy will be just as skilled as whoever Gray's master was. Her deduction ability is way too dangerous. Her eye can perceive the minute details and she can interpret them correctly. Gray said that he learnt to handle a sword at his hometown dojo, which is technically not a lie. For now, he needs to change the topic or risk disclosing his secrets. Back to the subject of damaged souls and swordsmanship, ordinary techniques cannot possibly connect these two intangible concepts. To begin with, she's well aware that Gray possesses a hidden move that can defeat an ogre general, and everything around with one slash. She already did her homework. Thanks to Gray's outrageous success, the wager she proposed with young Leon during the admission ceremony was a free victory. Ariel was shown some of the remains left at the scene and felt them to be simply lovely. Not even the most sophisticated cleaving magic could produce that level of precision and lethality. That unknown power within Gray, whatever it is, inflicted the wounded in his spirit. She can see it with her eyes. Ariel may gaze inside his spirit and peek at the power oozing through a locked door. Hearing her say that made him a believer. The locked door is the imagery he kept going back to inside his thoughts. This is not something one can figure out by guesswork. This chick is the real deal. That being said, Ariel had seen strength similar to Gray's before. While it wasn't a one-to-one replica, they had a very similar atmosphere. Curious, he wondered if there were other people with comparable unexplained powers like his. She knows of one that fits the description, but she's not 100% sure if they are human or not. Professor Ariel dubbed it the Liquidator, the same Liquidator who ushered in the end of the world. Based on his reaction, she could tell that the boy had heard of them one way or another. Gray's thoughts was reeling. Why is the Liquidator being referenced thus early in the timeline? The seductive professor didn't think that the young man would be familiar with such an arcane entity. But then again, he knows some futuristic kind of magic theory, so it's not that much of a surprise. Gray felt a little weird getting credited with the revolutionary thought, when he only restated what he learned from the genuine genius. Curious, Ariel quizzed him on how much he knows about the so-called liquidator. In all honesty, he doesn't know much, but he's certain that the liquidator is a tremendously severe menace to humanity. That entity has to be stopped before he can collect more power, something that needs to be killed, no matter the cost. Ariel considered his viewpoint a little too severe, but she acknowledged that the liquidation poses some danger. Even nevertheless, Balian Bradley seems focused on continuing his investigations on this issue. It sounds like the coming calamity of apocalypse is somehow tied to the fabled magic terrorist. As far as Ariel knows, the liquidator is the same being Balian Bradley is seeking to conjure. This was news to Gray. No one ever told him the origin of mankind's nemesis. Thinking about it, the Academy in the last timeline acted as a key point of history. The higher-ups operated as if they knew exactly where the liquidator would appear. There's a considerable probability that the World Union Academy itself had a hand in summoning the liquidator all along. The professor and the clandestine freshman agreed that this exceedingly reckless experiment had to be stopped before it got out of hand. Unfortunately, the one running the study is also a tenured professor. Ariel doesn't have the authority to shut him or his experiments down. She already attempted to push the higher-ups to move, but they simply wouldn't listen. Unfortunately, she doesn't have the authority to give any more information to an ordinary student. The simple fact is, until orders come from above, no one can force Balian Bradley to cease his madness. Gray was hoped to at least learn the identities of the Academy's higher-ups, but that's out of the question for now. It looks like the Academy's leadership is more complicated than he expected. But if he can prove that Professor Bradley is a dangerous criminal, maybe they could have enough guns to change things. In the prior timeline, Balian's illicit experiments killed the lives of tens of thousands. And Gray knows where these horrors will happen. There shouldn't be any damage in discussing this knowledge with Professor Ariel. This way, they can catch the psychopath red-handed. But she outrightly knocked down the notion. Entering an Academy professor's research facility without permission is regarded a serious felony on its own. They might have to give strong evidence in a different way without facing prison time themselves. But if Gray can deliver some hard proof right now, that might change things. If not, then they have no choice but to shelve this proposal for the time being. It sounds like Ariel is aware of the probable dangers, but her hands are bound by bureaucracy and Academy politics. It's frustrating, but understandable. More importantly, she wants to dive deeper into the topic of Gray's unique abilities. She intimated that there might be a way to learn how to regulate that lethal weapon. There's a professor in the Academy who specializes in dealing with mysterious forces. Gray's case is the perfect puzzle to solve. Professor Heathcote Longfellow is his name. Gray has heard the name before. Heathcote Longfellow was the one who trained the Sword Saint herself. He's a legendary figure. Ariel understood that this proposal would attract the young man's interest. She agreed to organize a private training session with the Stoic professor for tomorrow. Gray gratefully accepted Ariel's aid. The exact reason he came to the Academy was to learn this talent after all. He didn't expect to find a solid lead so early. Things are finally looking up. The very following day, Gray found himself in close proximity to the stern professor. His first private lesson from Heathcote Longfellow is started. Ariel sure worked fast. Gray expected some intense exercise or substantial theoretical courses, but Professor Longfellow brought him to the woods, and now they're jogging in circles. They're still inside the Academy zone, but they're in the center of a large section of forest. While he was trying to figure out the point of this aimless jogging, Professor Longfellow admonished him for letting his mind wander. Instead of contemplating wandering thoughts, he should be ramping up his pace instead. They must run and push the body to its maximum limits. Longfellow believes that the force of the soul truly wakes once every drop of physical strength is burned away. Gray is prevented from touching his blade until every tiny iota of his stamina has been spent. The young man can't comprehend the wider picture yet, but he absolutely trusts Heathcote's tactics. Still, while he's out here doing laps, Balian is carrying out inhuman experiments to call the arbiter of the end. It's hard to get your mind off that nagging thought. Gray is bearing the burden of future sight, and it is slowing him down. Nevertheless, he's persisted with the exercise schedule for an entire week. On the 7th day, he was summoned to report back to Professor Ariel. Gray felt a little embarrassed that all he's been doing was continuous jogging and only a bit of sword training at the very end. Admittedly, he senses a modest improvement in strength. Ariel couldn't hold her pleased laugh. She's well aware of Heathcote's odd ways. With the report completed, a messenger politely entered the office. He presented a sealed letter addressed to Professor Ariel. She immediately opened the mail, and her expression slowly twisted as she went through the correspondence. By the time she reached the conclusion of the letter, she was frozen in her seat. Worried, Gray questioned what was wrong. She wordlessly handed him the letter to examine for himself. It would be better that way. The lunatic had gotten the report of Bella Albright's super-compressed ether breakthrough. He argued that although there's a similar likeness, the young mage has not actually achieved the level reported. He therefore refuses to accept her new skill. Accordingly, the operation contract remains legitimate, and the surgery shall proceed as scheduled. It was a ludicrous letter written by a skilled rage baiter. It was lunacy. Ariel is upset. It seems Balian Bradley is desperate to get his hands on a prime guinea pig in the form of Bella. He's trying to coerce her into a wholly needless and harmful treatment. Unfortunately, the maniac has all the power. The magic pact Bella struck was airtight. Unless Bradley voids it himself, Bella is compelled to choose between expulsion and committing her body to a psychopath. Gray refused to accept such crap. Ariel concurred. This letter sparked a fire under her ass to act with no regard for bureaucracy, and she wants Gray's help. She wants to know the location of Bradley's secret lab. It will be risky, but she must expose that woman as a criminal to render the absurd contract null and void. Finally, she's down to getting her hands dirty. This is precisely what Gray needs. Gloatingly, he inquired why she had changed her mind while exposing a colleague professor without sufficient proof on hand, which poses a danger that is too high. Well, they are past working within the confines of the law. She's placing her faith in Gray in order to defend another one of her dear students. From the very outset, her sight had known that this would happen, that Gray had been telling the truth this entire time. It took some time and a clearly ludicrous letter to admit it, but Ariel is finally awake. It's time for Gray to lead the way, guided by knowledge of the future. Together, they will bring that psycho's crimes against humanity to light. The Dark Swordsman returns. As far as he knows, that filthy laboratory is concealed in the mountains near the settlement of Torowell. Professor Ariel vaguely recalls news that one of the other faculty members had been given clearance to create a lab there. This means such illegal and brutal experiments have been sanctioned by the Academy. There is no better spot to undertake clandestine research than the mountains of Torowell. Practically no one will bat an eyelash if he stays there for long. On top of that, instructors of the Academy follow the unwritten rule banning meddling with each other's initiatives. But as long as they can acquire some proof indicating that crimes against humanity are being performed, they shouldn't be charged with breaking and entering. While they were debating the plan of attack, Bella knocked on the door and Ariel let her in. She had just received a letter that carried the awful news. Her emotions are in turmoil with an overwhelming sense of defeat. Professor Ariel snatched the letter from her palm, telling Bella that this situation will be taken care of, one way or another. It sounds like Ariel is intending to face Varian Bradley all by herself, and Bella won't stand for that. With a cocky smirk, she vowed that she could solo that scoundrel any day of the week. The anxious young girl gave Gray a desperate look to help, so he stood forward and vowed to come with the professor. Stealing her determination, Bella also volunteered to tag along. She doesn't want to rely on everyone else to solve her situation. Ariel felt she could just move by herself. She warned them that Varian is a seasoned professor. Not only that, he's also a madman who has no regard for human life. If he catches an unskilled pupil trying to derail his intentions, there's no telling what he might do. As the grown-up in this discourse, she can't possibly jeopardize these youngsters. But Gray regarded this as all the more reason why going alone is perilous. He said that he could tap into the power he utilized to knock down an ogre general if the necessity arises. He won't be dead weight. Besides, if something horrible occurs to Ariel, then the Divine Eye program would certainly get dissolved, effectively expelling Gray and his colleagues. He would rather have a vote on his future, an option to decide their own fate. Seeing the determination in their eyes, Ariel could not possibly say no. They made it sound like they would still come, even if she prohibited them to. In such instance, she would agree to make this a team mission under one condition. No matter what occurs, they must prioritize their own safety first and foremost. Gray and Bella easily accepted the stipulation. After wrapping up some cautious procedures, the three walked into the spooky mounds of Torowell Mountains. Tucked within and hidden away, Varian Bradley's huge private laboratory stood before their eyes. It's hard to conceive what type of tragedies are going on inside those high walls. Once again, the primary purpose of this mission is to obtain proof of criminal conduct. Nothing more, nothing less. With unmistakable wrath in his eyes, Gray affirmed that they were in the appropriate area. On the other side, Bella sensed apprehension. She's dubious if they could truly pull this off without any trouble. Professor Ariel already done her assignment. Varian Bradley should be at the Magic Society's convention right now. The lab should be Varian-free. Still, there's a fair likelihood that the main entrance is littered with all sorts of traps. Just to be safe, they should burst through the side wall and establish their own entry. Breaking into an Academy-authorized lab is already a criminal anyway. There's no difference regardless of what method they use. One final time, Ariel gave Bella the choice to go back if she changed her mind. Gripping her staff hard, she cast all her misgivings away. She wondered if the professor was really willing to go through all this trouble for someone like her. Gray interjected and stated that this operation is not only for her sake. Stopping Varian Bradley's wicked designs is for the world's sake. If they don't do something now, many people will die and the whole planet would suffer. Professor Ariel found his explanation a little overdone, but she agreed that the wayward animal must be stopped. So Bella should just chill and get out of her brain. She's not the only one who needs saving. With all that prelude out of the way, Ariel led the way, dragging Bella along as Gray sprinted alongside them at full speed. Upon reaching the side wall of the tall lab, she calmly activated a fiery spell. Multiple powerful streaks of flames tore through the concrete without resistance. The following explosion lighted up the whole mountain with a searing glow. You've got to give it to the professor. She knows how to put up an over-the-top show. Gray was the first one to peer through the immediate entrance. What he saw inside made his skin crawl. Laid before his eyes was a long and dark hallway with innumerable detention cells lining both sides. Inside those cells were emaciated inmates, locked up and catatonic from intense abuse. Some of them seemed dead. Some were losing limbs and gushing out of their infected open wounds. They knew they would uncover something, but they didn't expect it to happen so fast. There's no need to even make an effort to hunt for incriminating evidence. The gang traversed the lengthy hallway. Every single iron-barred cage was packed with Varian Bradley's victims. So far, Ariel has discovered evidence of 14 unlawful spells employed on the captives. That fact alone should convict Varian of significant criminal charges. There isn't even a need to discuss the huge number of evident human rights crimes performed in this area. Eventually, they stumbled to a big room in the midst of the lab. The floors were caked with old and fresh blood. At the middle, an ominous magic circle may be seen. It looked like some type of an altar. The first idea was to get in, collect some concrete evidence and get out. But the kind young sorceress felt impelled to help the victims trapped in this hellscape. Gray sensed a troubling foreboding. They shouldn't stay in this place for long. A rescue effort would take considerably too long, and Varian might return. Before they could even come up with their next move, a ghostly figure came from the darkness. He gradually proceeded towards the gathering as though he was strolling through his private garden. Professor Ariel immediately recognized the man, inching closer to them. It was the guy, the myth, the hideously ugly-ass crazy scientist himself, Varian Bradley. Bro thinks he has aura. Gray immediately drew his blade, ready to respond to whatever evil Ankh would do. Varian Bradley gloated that he arranged for a double to go to the conference in his stead. He's on the edge of a huge breakthrough in his experiment after all. This individual bragged that he managed to get his hands on some really fresh materials for an important function. You see, he likes to employ his human lab rats while they're still fresh and breathing. But seeing Professor Ariel and her darling pupils on his doorstep, he decided to pivot and rethink the plan. Ariel concerned for her students. Bella was paralyzed by guttural horror, and Gray was ready to throw hands at any moment. Tonight's experiment would provide a considerably better outcome if the materials used possessed more potential for magic than the typical individual. Varian has no clue how they found out about his small hell on Earth, but he's positive that these three are acting surreptitiously. That means they never tell anyone where they're going. If they all suddenly go missing, not a single soul would know where to look. Whatever twisted thing Varian has in store for them would not lead to suspicion. Forget the crimes against humanity. Give this man the electric chair for that scary-ass smile. From the sound of his evil discourse, it's evident that Professor Varian is yearning to make them into lab rats that would test the bounds of magic itself for a heavy price. Since they had previously seen all the dirty laundry, they could not be left alive. he might as well make advantage of their magic power as best as possible. In the middle of his pompous diatribe, Varian noticed a big flame heading for his dome. The magic detonated with a blazing explosion that illuminated up the desiccated chamber. Surprisingly enough, the strike didn't come from Professor Ariel. It came from the future great sage herself, Bella Albright. Looking at her determined attitude, it seems like her initial dread is gone. Unfortunately, a stealth attack of this kind won't do the job. Varian shielded himself with a barrier in the nick of time. Even so, he acknowledged the girl's promise and stunning decisiveness. He attributed the discovery of such an amazing ability to Ariel's heavenly eye. He had never really paid careful attention to special admissions classes before. Perhaps he should start looking carefully at the other recruits in that problematic batch. Nevertheless, a simple academy student seeking to assassinate a professor would never work. The gap is too wide. Tossing away all her anxieties, Bella concluded that it would be preferable to get her hands bloody rather than be slain. She nearly missed her chance, though. Worried for her students, Ariel issued the order to retreat. They already have their evidence, and the academy should be able to handle the rest. Professor Varian won't just let them go away freely. Before they could take one stride away, a scorching black energy burst out of the insane professor's scepter. In retribution, his major objective was Bella. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. Ariel had to move fast on her feet to take the brunt of the attack with her radiant barrier. With maximum concentrate, she strengthened the barrier while the dark energy remained. Varian haughtily remarked that protective magic is futile for this voracious flame, which is one of the cherished prizes of his extensive research. The spell generates a flame so hungry that it consumes and devours defensive magic, turning it into fuel. In principle, it's a perfect spell that cannot be blocked. Its main negative was the required usage of some rare organic material to cast. As Varian stated, Ariel's barrier was swiftly broken apart and consumed, making the greed flame bigger and wilder. She sought to salvage the situation by getting her heavenly eye involved. Tapping into that enigmatic force provided her enough time to put up another barrier. When the first layer eventually fell in, the second layer received the brunt of the supercharged prohibited power. As expected, Ariel's second barrier was also damaged and engulfed by the flame in a couple of seconds. Fearing the worst, she tossed a spell memory pouch to Bella in gray. She reckoned that if Heathcote sees the pouch, that man will know what to do. Instead of taking the facts and running, Bella built up a barrier of her own instead. Ariel started panicking. She already realized that this might be the end of the line for her, but it doesn't have to be for her students. Even still, Bella wasn't into the notion of quitting her professor in the thick of combat while she still had some gas left in the tank. Ariel brought up the pledge they made before this expedition. They all agreed that if something goes wrong, survival must be emphasized. Varian's magic is definitely abnormal. All Ariel can do is buy time with her quickly diminishing defensive spells. While disputing with the student, that defensive spell finally fell apart. She felt the rebound of her spell dissolving, and Bella swiftly picked up the slack. Her translucent barrier matched Gluttony Flame's power wonderfully. Bella evaluated Varian's strike and decided that it's not that strong by itself. It merely needs a slightly different form of defense magic to combat. Seeing his flame cease in its tracks, Varian almost fell out. The counter-magic theory for this spell is known to just a select few, so how could a mere student figure it out? Bella carelessly stated that someone exceptional had lately taught her some new theory. With that, every spell had gotten far easier to read. From the brink of crashing out, Varian went full-on insane. He suspects someone from his inner group betrayed him and sought to know the name of the traitor. Teasing him with the most innocent face, maintained the identity of her master a secret. The man who opened up the world of magic to her is an ordinary student from the swordsmanship course. He painstakingly relayed some insane concepts about magical theory, and with Bella's obvious intellect, fitting all the knowledge together came easy. Varian is a victim of a successful anger bait. Look at this man's veins, bro. They're about to pop. Have you been baited so hard that you pull out a suspicious bleeding crystal to boost your murdering act further? Crushing the bloodied gem in his palm, the human souls trapped in that object streamed out to fuel his flame even more. The flames appeared more like a sentient beast than an inanimate enchantment. Varian might be committing crimes against magic and mankind, but his spell looks amazing as hell. Even so, Bella reckons that her barrier can hold for a bit longer. She can theoretically continue this standoff endlessly, but her mana supplies won't last for long. At her best, she can probably squeeze out one more minute. With her hands full on defense, Ariel would have to pick up the slack on offense. Using her heavenly eye, the red-headed professor locked in. Seeing the flow of power clearly, she observed a region where the flames were very thin. If she can project mana outside the barrier, Ariel might be able to break through. She summoned charged strings of mana to readily flow past Bella's impenetrable barrier. From her position to Varian's, Ariel had a clean route to a death shot. Unfortunately, her spiraling lines of mana were simply too small to muscle through gluttony flames. They progressively petered out till they were entirely snuffed out. Varian chuckled at the feeble counterattack attempt. As far as Gray remembers, Professor Ariel's offensive magic is one of the weakest among the crew. Her specialty lies elsewhere. With the flame's properties, her essentially weak attacking power must have been devoured too. They have to think out a way to wrap things up swiftly. Bella is starting to feel gassed out. Her stance is slipping and her grip is shaking. The barrier might go down any second now. This is precisely why Ariel tried to encourage her students to run to safety earlier. With all other choices exhausted, it's time for the main event Gray to take up the responsibility. Bella didn't know how he could possibly inflict any damage when there was a storm of intense magic between his blade and Varian. Gray basically replied, "Nah, I'd win." Professor Ariel could read what he was intending and advised Gray against using his odd gift again. Using it too soon could render his healed arm unrecoverable, or it could even kill him. Nevertheless, dying alone is better than all three of them dying, isn't it? Besides, they were worrying about nothing. The MC soon broke through the gluttony flame, exposing a deadly crimson glow on the opposite side for Varian to witness. The last thing the crazed professor saw was Gray's unpredictably precise slash, mingled with droplets of his own blood. His brain was still attempting to figure out what the fuck just happened, while his head was neatly separated from his body. Just like that, Professor Varian Bradley was appropriately hanged for his list of crimes. His executioner is the man who's going to change the course of history.